Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had your fix of caffeine, nicotine, whatever else. So welcome to the co-location panel. And Tony O'Brien is my name. I'm Deputy Executive Director of EENA. And I suppose this is a kind of traditional fixture on the last day. And we tried to bring together, I suppose, some of the thoughts and some of the ideas that have kind of come through the previous days in relation to co-location. In particular, we're going to focus on the area of mobile co-location. So I'm joined this morning by four very distinguished guests. I'll briefly introduce them. Starting here beside me, I have Florin Dragomir, and Florin is works for ANCOM, the Romanian telecommunications regulator. And he heads up the department that looks at technical regulations and specifically the area of emergency communication. So Florin, you're very welcome. Beside Florin is Ola Bergström, hope I pronounced that correctly, Ola. He works for the Swedish Post and Telecom Authority and he's Director for International Affairs. And he also happens to hold the very distinguished position as chair of the contact network with BEREC, which is the European body of regulators, and PTS is the chair of BEREC for this year. It rotates on an annual basis, and we'll hear more from Ula. Beside Ula then is Gula Bara, who's the policy officer for 112 in the European Commission, and he's responsible for policy development and implementation of the 112 inside the regulatory framework. He also was captain of the quiz winning team last night, so welcome Gula. Besides Gula was Frederick Brunetel, pronounced that correctly, Frederick. He's managing director of Patelmus Consulting Group, and he runs an organization who are international strategic advisors concentrating primarily on telematics and location-based services, and is renowned as a subject matter expert in the field. So Frederick, you're very welcome. And very last at the end is Arturas Kadvakius, more or less. And Arturas is the former head of the Lithuanian Emergency Response Centre. So, as I said, very distinguished guests this morning. So I suppose we'll begin by having a quick look at the agenda. Excuse me, I got the zapper. And we're going to cover four kind of main points in a flow, a natural flow, I hope. And it's really looking at the kind of current state of play for the legislation, at least. Get some thoughts around that in relation to location accuracy. Then look at some of the areas of compliance or non-compliance, as the case may be, with those EU rules, EU legislation. There are some changes potentially coming down the track in relation to Article 26, which was touched on slightly this morning, but we want to get into some detail on that. Not a whole lot, but just some. And a quick look into the future, because there are some changes or amendments or progress, I think, that we can hopefully report on, and the speakers will hopefully get a chance to outline those progresses. And maybe, if we have time at the very end, coming up to 12 o'clock, we'll try and have some questions from the floor. So we hope that's doable. So I want to, I suppose, start by having a quick look at the Article 26. I won't dwell too long on this, but just to refresh everybody's memory. And the first is that the obligation is there. It's not a discretionary choice, it's a shall. Competent regulatory authorities shall lay down criteria, so there's no doubt about that. In addition to that, in the same article, in order to ensure effective access to 112 services, the Commission, having consulted BEREC, may then adopt technical implementing measures. It's a may, so there's a bit of discretion in that. We know as well from the COCOM report, and again mentioned this morning and indeed yesterday, that the main methodology for obtaining location information currently is effectively set ID or sector ID. And we also heard from CPT this morning, from Freddie, in relation to the work going on and we'll hear from Florian in just a minute. And of course, ETSI and M493 as well. So that's the kind of the context and the landscape of where we are. So I suppose, Florian, the first question is for you, which is about the work of CEPT. And what I really want to maybe ask you to address is what the likely impact is going to be on the work. We heard from Freddie on some of the detail, but at a higher level, where do you think the output is really going to make a difference, and how?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. Really pushing the ball to me. The idea is that what we are trying to do here is to clarify some of the things, some of the technical aspects that are related to the various positioning methods that are already on the market, be it from mobile side, be it from satellite positioning systems, be it from some software developers. Like, as you've seen, we have talked to Google, we have talked to equipment manufacturers, we have talked to operators with the GSA in order to get first-hand information from them and to clarify let's say, the worries that a regulator asked himself when dealing with this issue of trying to cope with this issue of criteria for accuracy and reliability.
So it's really it's a group gathering together, if you like, the feasibility of what's out there, the technology that's available out there, but it's just a report. So is that the very early stages, or is there something likely to follow thereafter?
It's as it is in the objectives of the group. It's a report with recommendations. Of course, as the document, I see the question if the document is binding. Is not binding. As I said, it's a report with recommendation, but it clarifies a lot of aspects, and I can tell you that already during the work that we have between the various NRAs within this group, we have started work also nationally, each of us, and there are already some progresses in these national discussions be it with PSAPs, with emergency organization, and so on. So this is another, let's say, byproduct of the report and of this activity that is also important.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. And I think we all certainly support the work that you're doing. Ula, next question is for you, and I hope your microphone is on. So it's really looking back at the previous quote from the legislation about the competent regulatory authorities. Do you know who they are? And given that BEREC's mentioned specifically in the legislation, what the role of BEREC is at this stage, remembering what we just heard from Florian?
I think this issue in general is nothing that's really been discussed in BEREC in the past. We had early discussions with the Commission last year about a possible, maybe not role, but that BEREC could get involved in some way to at least raise awareness and or help in some way, because it's, I mean, we all agree that this is an important issue. The problem with BEREC in this sense is that many of the members of BEREC, and those of you who don't know what BEREC is, it's all the national regulators for telecommunications. And one of the problems is that not all regulators, I think half of them, have mandate to deal with this issue. So I mean, BEREC in that sense is a good organization because it's on a high level, it's on a European scale, but the problem is that a lot of members that doesn't have the competence. So, I mean, the intention now is to have a discussion with the Commission if we can do anything to help. But that's basically as far as we've reached so far.
Sure. So that would mean that, as you said, half of your members are in this frame as the competent authority. So who are the other half?
Well,
or do you know?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
Well, from PTS, it's from my authority, it's easier because I mean we're deeply involved in this on all levels in CPT and so on. But if you push it to BEREC, that becomes another issue.
Sure. Okay. So we have half a role, but that's about as much. Okay.
One addition here, and we thank PTS because they are participating also in the CPT work. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Arturas, next question is for you. So you were former head of the Lithuanian ERC, and I suppose you were at the coal face in terms of the impact of lack of caller location and so on. So in your role as head of the Lithuanian ERC, what type of dialogue did you have with your competent authority? I don't know whether that's the regulator or who it is, in terms of why they didn't define any such criteria.
Thank you for a nice question. It wasn't a dialogue. You must understand that in this case we have at least 4 sides. It's subscribers or just general population, because it's possible to call 112 without SIM card, so they're not subscribers for operators. It's national regulator, who in our case was just a watcher of the situation, just very nice, yeah, you can do it, yeah. And just try to find out some decision with business, with companies, with GSM operators.
Sure.
And this dialogue was like, guys, can you do it for us? We don't have money for it. Our regulation, or European regulation, not clear. It's supposed to be. You must send this information, and state is responsible for it. But can you please do it? And answer was no. We need some millions for it.
Sure.
So in our case, it was dialogue like this before last autumn, before this tragic event. Then our GSM operators just remember that they're social responsible companies, and they did it for free.
Okay.
In 2 months.
So it seems there's a disconnection between what the law is, if you like, and the way it's transposed, or the way it's viewed or implemented by the regulator. We'll come on and talk about the specific incident in a minute, but thanks for that. Frederick, question for you, just standing back a little bit from the detail and standing back a little bit from the regulation. In your view, can you summarize where we are in terms of A, the technical capabilities, B, do we have the necessary legislation, and C, if we have all of those things in place, why we don't see some progress?
I think it's fair to say that it's not a technology issue. Today we can get to centimeter location with some technologies. Was it Mobile World Congress? You can position things very accurately. So it's not a question about technology. It's a question about trade-off between cost, technology, and benefits. And I think we currently, I've been saying that for a few years now, but I think we're lacking an impact study about what are the costs versus the benefits, because that's the key. It is possible to have very accurate location. It is possible to have relatively affordable accurate location as well. I think what I've seen so far in this domain is, in my view, a lack of common sense. And I know that in the emergency domain we need to have technologies that work very well, but there is no technology that works 100% of the times. And here we are trying to solve a problem which is to be there on time, to save lives. And I think for this, we need to be pragmatic. Emergency services are pragmatic every day when they dispatch ambulances, for example. Why aren't we pragmatic? Why aren't we, for example, using a cocktail of different technologies, as is the case in the private sector? I'm asking a question because if anybody has an answer against that, I think I'll be happy to hear it. There is nothing that says that technology must work in 100% of cases. Actually, no technology works in 100% of cases. So that's a clear fact. So I think the trend from the technology side, and I'll finish with that, is really a cocktail of different technologies combined. And so in rural areas, having enhanced cell ID location technologies makes a lot of sense. In urban areas, it's probably not the best.
Sure.
In urban areas, you would see, for example, Wi-Fi, as mentioned during this conference, as being probably the best technology.
Yeah.
You can actually, with the new version of Wi-Fi, you can even have meter level accuracy in both in urban areas, but also inside buildings. And we know from the US experience that it's also something very, very important too.
Sure. And I guess we have to be able to walk before we can run. So let's look at Wi-Fi as potential opportunity down the road. But we are currently at a very, very low level in terms of the accuracy we have right now. Gula, predictably, last question for you in this section at least. So the Commission has a role to play as, if you like, guardian of the treaty and the vehicle by which the legislation is shaped, the way the legislation is then transposed and then implemented at national level. So can you comment at all as to the Commission's role so far in what's been done in this area, and particularly around the area of, as it says on the screen, technical implementing measures, and why thus far they haven't been adopted?
Thank you, Tony, and first of all, thank you for inviting me the third time.
Always welcome, Gula.
Not
Always
that I
welcome.
had a choice, but well, we heard. Well, the Commission is basically bound to implement whatever is given in its competence. If you can go back to the first slide, you will see that there are two obligations. First is an obligation bestowed on member states to lay down caller location criteria, and secondly, the option for the Commission to intervene with technical implementing measures when we would see that things are not efficient enough. I think that everybody here is of the opinion that things are not moving. Technology is light years away from what is being implemented. There is the expectations of citizens who have caller location in their accurate caller location in their everyday life. Therefore, the Commission could adopt technical implementing measures, but this would mean basically mandating a technology, mandating technological solutions or technological standards, which in this area where technologies are evolving year by year, and we heard that maybe.
Sorry, just to interrupt. I don't understand why. Why are you saying you have to mandate the technology? Why?
Because under the Lisbon Treaty, can you go back to the first slide? Under the Lisbon Treaty, under technical implementing measure, we cannot adopt such normative obligations like caller location criteria, like the one which we have in the United States, but only technical measures, technical norms.
Okay, I think that's a really important point. So
this is a legal issue. We could adopt caller location criteria if we would be mandated to adopt delegated acts.
Yeah, we'll come on to delegated acts in just a second, because
this is the opinion of our legal service.
Okay.
Can I ask? I think I just want to ask a question about why Commission in this case in conflict with its own. Because just to refresh your memory, in 2006, 2007, it was a big infringement procedure on caller location. And Lithuania was target of one of targets that's in this procedure. before, in the old version of Universal Directive, it was that caller location information should be available to emergency services. Is it technically feasible? Something like this. And according to that, we asked our GSM operators, is it technically feasible? And got a written answer that it's not technically feasible. Okay. And as a new member state of European Union, we were so naive and honest, and we put our answers to COCOM report, and Commission start infringement against us. And main reason why they did it was that if it's possible, technically possible, in other countries, and GSM technologies is the same all over the world, it should be possible in Lithuania too. Okay, I understand it, but why now you said it's not possible?
I think. Sorry, go just 1 second before you answer that.
Misunderstanding.
No, before you answer that, because we want to move on to some of the other issues around infringement proceedings, because they are quite important. And I suppose we've had a quick look at some of the issues, and the technology I don't believe is the problem, and Frederick has mentioned that already, but we'll come back to that in just a second. So,
may I answer to this?
You can in just a second if you don't mind, because the second question is very related to it. Okay, so if you look at then the infringement proceedings issue that you just mentioned, Arturas, and we look at the COCOM report that you just mentioned, I think that's very important as well. We've seen evidence whereby there's in the layperson's eyes, a direct conflict with the obligations in the directive and what's reality on the ground vis-a-vis the COCOM report. And what we've here just mentioned a couple of countries, there are many, highlighting just 3 of them, where as soon as the call reaches the authority, the obligation is that location information should be presented, and it's not. So the question is, when is non-compliance non-compliance, and when should the Commission, under its powers, Gula, this question's for you, then take action? So if we have evidence in front of us, and I think you might have actually wrote the report or published the report, why there isn't some recompense for countries who breach the obligation doing what they're supposed to do?
Well, first of all, and we can bring here also the issue of caller location. First of all, the Commission is launching infringement procedures when we are convinced that case would be won in court. These procedures are long, very long. They take years, and they might cost quite a lot of money. And we would like to avoid the fact that we launch the infringement and then there is also only a cosmetic change in member state systems without a real impact, real implementation of legislation. Coming back to your example of caller location, back then, so we proposed to the Council and the Parliament, and this technical feasibility condition was taken out of the legislation. But back then, the problem was that caller location exists or not. It doesn't exist. It's a clear case of infringement. We launched the infringement. We even got in a really advanced stage in court, and we saw that member states started to comply with our regulation. Our problem today is that all member states report that caller location is available. There is the obligation of laying down caller location criteria. We could launch infringement about for not implementing caller location criteria, but we are pretty sure that, well, you also know that it might be that as a result, member states would or operators would implement cell ID, and this would be the criteria, and they would comply with our legislative framework.
Okay. Can I move you on a small bit if you don't mind? I'm just conscious of time. We'd love to hear you.
But the bottom line is that we would have launched an infringement procedure without having meaningful impact.
Okay. I think the previous slide showed that there is potential non-compliance with, as soon as the call reaches the authority, 38 minutes waiting for caller location is not where we should be.
I agree.
You agree? The member state who is culpable needs to understand the consequences. And maybe the consequences are not infringement proceedings in a court case perspective, but perhaps an administrative letter, which is the first stage, and I can guarantee you that that will get a reaction internally within the country. So Florin, if I can turn to you with your regulator hat on, not your PTES chairman hat on, about exactly that point, about infringement proceedings, administrative letters. Do you think, as a regulator, when a administrative letter comes across your desk, that it's ignored or that there's a reaction? And if you can show that you're making an impactful change, that's good enough. Do you agree that that proceedings is useful?
Well, the quick answer is half yes, half no. Because yes, there is an impact, definitely. But if we are talking about the criteria for accuracy and reliability, if we were to receive such a letter right now, when we are in the middle of studying this effect at European level inside CEPT, inside this PT, and drawing some conclusions, if I would have to ask rapidly, I would go back and say, look, we have cell ID, and that's a criteria. So this is why I'm saying that if it is partly yes, because yes, we will act on this, but right now, if something like this would happen, there would be no other choice to act.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. I'm just conscious of time, and I don't want to delay, and hopefully get some questions from the floor. Gula, you mentioned earlier about delegated acts, and this is a potential change to Article 26 that's going through a specific piece of law related to the connected continent, not specifically for 112, but there is this draft in bold, and it mentions the issue of changing the way the Commission could potentially take action using the ability under these delegated acts. And I just put, for the benefit of the audience, just put up the text in relation to what delegated acts might mean. So, can you give us your assessment of what delegated acts could potentially do, and how you would potentially use it to make progress?
Yes. Well, there is a proposal because for the Commission being empowered to adopt delegated acts, because clearly having the power to adopt only technical implementing measure, and I saw you jumping up when I said that technical implementing measures what is the problem with the current legislation? Under the Lisbon Treaty, technical implementing measures would allow the Commission to adopt only technical measures applicable on the territory of the EU. That would go against, and this is an interpretation of our legal service which we received last year, trying to go ahead with caller location criteria, and we were blocked there on legal grounds.
Just to understand, I really don't understand what you're saying, because just to take something very close to this business, which is equal, it's very close, and equal, there are about 30 standards primarily driven by the Commission to make it happen. Why isn't there a wish and a willingness from the Commission to do the same for something that actually can save many more lives than just equal? And again, I'm not against equal, but just to compare two topics.
We compare them, it's not a problem. Equal is not 112. With equal, we mandated one clear standard which has to be implemented. We will have to adopt type approval regulation. Can we do the same for 112? No,
Why not?
I don't think so.
Why not?
But well,
eCall is based on 112, is it not?
it is based, but can we adopt one technological solution?
No, I think you need to be technology neutral, but what you can certainly do is issue some guidelines or recommendations about how Article 26 can be implemented.
The delegated acts would allow us not only to adopt guidelines, not only adopt recommendations, but to adopt caller location criteria as such, which is today given into the exclusive competence of member states.
Okay, so this is a member state issue currently. It's not happening, so potentially we'll see some Commission-driven mandatory targets. Is that what you're saying, under this delegated act regime?
If we are mandated to adopt delegated.
Okay, we'll come back on that perhaps, because if we have time, and I'm sure the audience have a couple of questions. I can see some of them jumping around in their chair when you're talking. So we'll see if we can get to that. Not just Frederick is jumping. So Ulla, if I may bring you in, you came all the way from Sweden, so I'm going to ask you more than one question. The Commission website currently states that let me read it, the CEPT report, which Floren's team are working on, could be the basis for the work item in BEREC. Now, we had a quiz last night, and this is another quiz question. Could it be something that you could use, or is it something that you're aware of? And as PTS, I guess you are, but as BEREC, and is that something you can start working on now, or do you have to wait for CEPT to complete its work?
Well, I would say that the most BEREC members are not very well aware of that. And sorry. And we currently are analyzing the EP position now. And a risk we've discussed in the past about this issue is about not duplicating roles with CEPT. I think that's a huge risk. And looking at these, the question, it's almost indicated that this is slightly too technical for BEREC even to start discussing at this point.
So have you had discussions with the Commission thus far on, because if I understand correctly, they wrote to you and asked you to look at this issue inside your work programme for 2014. It's in the work programme for 2014. So what's that dialogue like between BEREC and the Commission as to what you can actually do?
I should say just in a starting phase, and we will not discuss any details about this. This is a fairly new issue in BEREC.
Okay, all right, okay. So I guess at this stage we can potentially take some questions from the audience. But before we do that, I think to be fair to look to the future about what's potentially coming down the track. We spoke about CEPT already. So Gula, from your idea and from your perspective, I should say, what's the plan for improving things right now? I just put a link here for those of you later on who can look at it. This came, if I understand correctly, very recently about a consultation stroke public hearing on the use of GNSS for 112 caller location. So where's the plan for the next short to medium term?
Thank you. Well, first of all, we are looking towards the negotiation between the council and the parliament to see what will come out of the negotiation, and how our legislative framework might be changed. But the most important thing is to give full support to the CPT work, where we identified already last year the CPT and within CPT the project team emergency services as the right forum and platform where the right technical expertise is present to work on this issue. We will definitely not stop there, and we would consider the report for our future plans.
Okay. Can I ask you just about
Yes.
that plan? So, do you have a strategic plan that you can share with us about the future, or do we leave it to other organizations to feed us with information? Where's the vision as policy?
It actually depends on the result of this report. If this technical report would point out the fact that yes, technical measures are needed and could be implemented throughout Europe, that is to define this, which would be quite difficult because you were talking about a technological mix. Frankly, at this point, I don't see how EU-wide applicable mandatory rule would provide for a technological mix which would fit every single geography, demography, and so on.
I think just before you go on to that point, because I think that's something the audience will ask, I think the intention here is not that the Commission would mandate one technology, because you can't. It's more that you would mandate a target. The member state would then decide how it wishes, or even the competent authority would understand that that's the target. We don't care how we get there. The industry and technology will find its way to achieve that particular milestone, that particular target. I think that's the major issue. So
I understand.
I don't think there's a plan from what you're saying. Is there a plan?
Under the current mandate, under technological implementing measures, we cannot adopt such criteria as we see in the United States.
I think we're asking for that either, by the way, but okay. So very last question for each of you, and I can ask you
but I would also mention this public hearing which we launched in 2 days ago.
Yes.
That is a public hearing, that is a public consultation which is launched by DG Enterprise, and it relates to the use of GNSS devices on phones for emergency services, and the question is whether Europe should mandate handset producers to produce GNSS compatible phones.
and I hope that if you do, that then there's an enforcement follow-up afterwards if it's not feasible, because enforcement, infringement proceedings, call it what you will, is so important. Okay, thank you for that, Gula, and we leave that link on the slides for sending around. One quick answer to this question, please, from everybody, which is the last one. What one thing, Florin, for you first, what one item will make a difference? Not a long answer, please, just one item.
In terms of vacuum.
Yeah, for location,
terms of location.
improvement, yes.
Well, in my perspective, finalizing the report, and you will all see the results of the report, because we are intending to have a public consultation also, and it will start in June, July this year. We'll give everyone, every regulator and everyone who has a role in establishing criteria, better idea of what he has to do, and what information related to each method positioning method is available.
Sure, thank you. So the report, it looks like it'll be responding to consultations all summer. Okay. Ula, same question for you. One item that will change?
Well, without being an expert on this, I say to define the roles of different actors in this chain. I mean, there's a lot of stakeholders involved here, and as a regulator, we regulate some of them.
Sure.
But there are also a lot of other national stakeholders and European stakeholders. I think to define the roles.
Who they are. Okay. And maybe that's a job for the Commission. I don't know whose role that is to find out whose role it is. If you know what I mean. Okay. Same for you, Gula?
It's not only a job for the Commission, but also the Parliament and the Council.
Okay, I use that in the collective term. Okay. One item that could make a difference from your side? Briefly, if you could.
More transparency. More transparency. We heard that we need to assess the costs and benefits. We saw data on costs, on benefits. We would like to also see data on costs.
Okay. Same for you, Frederick. Question.
Yeah.
The answer.
I think it's going to be important to have a good technical report, so I think that's going to improve, but I will repeat that it's not about the technology, it's about a trade-off between the objective, the benefits, and the costs. And so for me, there needs to be on this topic the same thing that has happened on equal and many other topics, which is to have a proper impact study about what are the benefits for this, how much money can be saved. There is cost, but there is also a way to save money for many people. That's already economic, and of course there should be a study also on the impact in terms of the number of lives saved. I think there is a need for that. Regarding the legislative framework, I would just add that if the Commission feels that the current legislative framework is not good enough to do something, then I will ask the Commission to change the legislative framework.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the first time that the Commission do something in terms of a new directive or a new etc. Sure. So that's something that is possible, as you know, and I would really expect that myself.
And I guess the Parliament have a role to play in the Council in that as well. Arturas, the same question for you, and then we're going to go to the audience for a quick question.
So I have a very simple proposal. Just drop technologies away. We're talking about requirements. So it's impossible to catch technologies. It's run very fast and change very fast, and ETSI and other official bodies is too slow in processes. So it's just drop it away. We need functional requirements for caller location information, at least from emergency response centers or same bodies in countries. We need very clear, very simple functional requirements. That together with call, it's supposed to be caller location information in this time, in this accuracy. It's all.
Okay. Thank you, Arturas, and thank you to the panel members for being brief. I know you could have answered that question much longer. Question from the floor, and I see at the very back, very quickly, hand was straight up. Yeah. Okay.
Just a comment. I feel the situation somehow embarrassing because it mismatches the way how emergency services work. They do not have the impression that they want to be good people and do something at some time, but who is in the emergency services here in the room?
50%, I would imagine.
So I understand if I'm on duty, I'm out in the car in 2 minutes and have a certain set of procedures which are not also technology neutral, but I know what to do and I do it. The point is, if we now discuss whether we want it or not, this is strange to me because it's in the directive and it's decided that we want it. It's only the question how we do it and how do we want to do it. And I think it's absolutely needed to be more precise and not in a general way to be good people somehow, but to say what we want and we need. These things are on the table. They are documents around hundreds of pages. The technologies are developing are here. I think it's a matter of a political will and the will to do it. There's nothing to reinvent, and we know for what it's good. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. To the front. If you get I'm going to say a microphone to the front. Thank you. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Bruno. You had the. Okay.
Thank you, Richard Lee from Creativity Software. Gula, a question for you, of course. You're saying that you can't impose specific measurements of accuracy because it's outside the Lisbon Treaty, but you can determine technologies. Is that correct? Is that what you were saying earlier? Just to understand. So if I understand correctly, everybody understands Cell ID. We've been using Cell ID, or lots of the presenters have been using Cell ID, and you've referred to Cell ID. Cell ID is the bottom line, is the most basic location technology available. So am I right in understanding that when the technology report comes in, you can draw from that and you can then impose technologies across Europe? I understand there'll be quite a lot of competing technologies, there'll be some complexity in it, but could you just let me know, you could therefore stipulate enhanced Cell ID, is that correct?
Well, if we have an impact assessment which clearly shows that enhanced Cell ID is feasible and benefiting society, then yes.
Okay. Because there is no question that enhanced Cell ID is possible. It's deployed in networks all around the world. It's 3GPP compliant. There are standards for it. There's no question as to whether it works. The question is simply whether you can find the political will to define that as the next layer, because that's a universal layer. You don't need to worry about GPS, handset compatibility. It's just the next layer up. Why would you not stipulate that today?
Well, we would like to go much further than that. And this is why we have this work, supporting this work in CEPT. And if this is a conclusion which is backed up by figures, then we could adopt enhanced Cell ID applicable throughout Europe, yes.
Okay,
but
thanks.
we would.
Thank you.
The goal is to go much further than this.
Okay,
and this hearing, which the Commission launched day before yesterday, points towards the fact that we are looking also on at handset-based technologies and so on.
Okay, thank you, Gula. Thank you, Richard. And I guess there's some dialogue to follow up from that. And I know you want to jump in, Florin, but just for the moment I can't. Okay. Question from the front here.
Okay, I'll try to be quick then. Yesterday we were presented by John a nice alternative in the UK from BT because as there is no requirement, then they are doing it. So aren't you scared that everybody is going to develop its own system in every country? Because time, I understand, and I was convinced coming in that it would be like that. The regulation won't come before 10 years, let's say, at the best. So everybody is going to be developing his own system in his own country. Nothing's going to be compatible. And then how do you do that?
Okay. Who's that question for, Bruno?
Oh, I guess for either Florin or Julia.
Okay.
Well, what we are actually trying to do with this report, and sorry it takes some time to do it, is to also compare the different methods based on different metrics that we have. I mean, it's not only the accuracy and the reliability that are at stake here, as the directive says, it's also the availability. As you may know, all methods work in some circumstances and do not work in other circumstances, while the criteria in principle should be drawn in such a way that they ensure that in all cases the accuracy of the location is improved. This is at least my understanding and our understanding. I mean, we do not want to mandate one or other technology which is an improvement for certain cases. We are trying to do something which will improve at national level for all calls and so on. We have to take into consideration all the different use cases.
And just remember that Cell ID doesn't work all the time either, so we have to be very careful about that. So I think this may be the last question. I know you, maybe 10 others, but if we get a microphone to the very front here, please. Thank you. Marianne.
Thank you very much. A very interesting panel. My name is Marianne Träska, former regulator in Sweden. And I have two questions. And the first one is to Mr. Bara. I fully agree with what you are saying, that technology neutrality is important. However, what is asked for is mandatory requirements. It could be have a technology affection. But in principle, technology neutrality, I fully agree with that. But the requirements the mandatory requirements are important if regulation could come before implementation. That's the right way to do it. For BEREC, I would ask, and I would also suggest or propose that you look into this issue to the next work plan, which is going to be prepared from now and in autumn for 2015, because this is a very important issue. And in comparison to 3G and 2G, I mean, it was never said which kind of technology was needed, but you have to upgrade in order to have all these requirements implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. I need to bring this to a close. We're a little bit over time, so can I just, before I do that, ask you to give a round of applause to all of our panel members here this morning. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for coming and sharing your thoughts and your ideas. So a little bit behind schedule, we're going to jump straight into the next session, which is the interactive session. So thank you to our speakers.